Hello friends, family, followers, and guests. Thank you for stopping. I want to and I'm going to talk about some truths concerning the COVID, CV-19. And these are absolute truths. You don't have to go to a pundit or the CDC to learn about them. In the latter part of October, I had the symptomatic check. If you were to go to the CDC site and you were to take that piece of paper and just take and this isn't that piece of paper, but as a representative example, and you start clicking off the symptoms: fever, total loss of taste and smell, aggressive liquid bowel movements, and so on. You go down the list. I had it all. I was sure that I had the CV, and I had difficulty breathing. There was an attack on my lungs. I wound up sitting upright for 3 days in the bed and using my BPAP machine, which is like a CPAP machine except for just providing air. Provides and then sucks, provides and then sucks. But the bottom line on that doesn't matter. The bottom line on that is that I finally started getting better right when I was about to make the decision to go into the hospital. So I did not go into the hospital. I didn't get identified. I didn't run any tests. I had to go into the VA for a different reason shortly after that, and they did the COVID test. And at that point, I tested negative, not positive. So here a few days ago, I again had an issue here in Arizona, and it was different, and it scared me. I had actual pain in both chests, unlike the heart pain that I had often had. This was different, and my old crap factor just went way up, just exploded. So I went in. After I called the VA emergency, and they did the triage thing over the phone, and they said, come in right now or we will send an ambulance. I took that as a pretty directive, so I went in. And what had happened is that I had a COVID attack. I tested positive, of course. And my body, in response to that, wound up doing internal defensive things. And one of the things that happened is the troponin level in my heart went way up. And that indicates that you either are having or you're about to have a heart attack. So I was in ICU for a few days. And then from ICU, they put me in the CV ward. I had the opportunity to talk to the doctor who is the in-house CV specialist. I had an opportunity to learn a lot of things as I sat on my butt, first in isolation and then in a particular room in CV. Yesterday, I got before I left, I got a companion. They were two-person rooms, and I got a person who, as badly as I felt challenged, he's in real serious condition. Anyway, I learned a lot about the CV, and one of those things I learned, what the VA would not do is they would not post-diagnose me with CV the first time. And that's because I didn't come in and get tested positive. The VA, unlike hospitals that are politically responsive, and not that the VA is not politically responsive, but with respect to the CV, at least the Phoenix hospital, will not list you as CV related for being there unless you've tested positive. And because the first time in October I did not go in with that, of course I didn't test positive. Now the doctor I talked to was absolutely excellent, just excellent. And her name was Bader, like in B-A-D-E-R. I really appreciated her bedside manner. No bullshit, no horsing around, tell it the way it is, but with a certain amount of empathy that certainly made the otherwise difficult information tolerable. So there I was, finding out that even though I was having COVID, actually for the second time in the space of just a few weeks, I wondered how that could be. So in discussions with the CV person, doctor, and with my doctor assigned to me at that moment in time, I learned a few things about the CV that you hear somebody talk about here and somebody talk about there, and you go to the CD site and you hear yet a third and fourth rendition of all this stuff. So the reality is you can have the COVID many times, and you can have it back to back. I have a person on my friends list who shall remain nameless, and she's had the CV multiple times. Not 2 times, but a bunch of times. So it's possible to get it again even though you've had it. Some people build up antibodies. The tests that they gave me there in Phoenix showed that I not only had the antibodies, but I had an extreme amount of them. I asked this question, well, having the antibodies that I have and having so much of it, does that mean I'm immune from the CV? And the CV specialist doctor said, absolutely not. We've had several people in here that have had the CV several times.
I'm here.
He says, I do the intake on each and every one of them. And I can tell you, and he's standing there looking me in the eye, about as far away from me as I am from this screen. And he's saying, I have treated that. He told me that what they have learned so far is that for some people, the antibodies work for as short as days or a week. And for some people, they appear to work for longer extended periods of time. For people such as myself, who have a serious amount of them and they appear pretty aggressive, I could reasonably expect on the short end 3 months, and perhaps on the long end 6 months, but they don't have enough empirical data yet to actually draw some real lines. And he asked me not to quote him, which is why I'm not using his name, because he was just having a real talk with me, telling me the way it was. I asked him what I could do, and they, in the COVID section, they wear a full face mask with a HEPA filter, air intake on their back. Makes a lot of noise. They have trouble hearing your heart. I got the COVID test. So the testing, how do we know this is true? I was tested for COVID every 4 hours. Every 4 hours. And for the COVID test, they don't take it, and I have some spots here on my arm where they put ports in case they had an emergency, but they don't take it from the ports. Each time they stab you new and take it so that it's assured that there's nothing in it that interferes with the testing procedure. So what I learned, the punchline is, what I learned is that people can have the COVID many times, not that they will, but that they can, that the antibodies do not make an immunity similar to the immunity one gets from the measles, where you get it once, you don't get it again. The antibodies wear off over time, and you become susceptible again. What a boon for the pharmaceutical industry when they come out with the inoculation, because they're going to convince you, or try to convince you need that inoculation every 3 months or 4 months, regardless of whether you need it. They get paid for that. That your insurance pays for it, or that the VA pays for it, or Uncle Warbucks pays for it, doesn't matter. They get paid for it. They're not doing it for free. So it's in the interest of the pharmaceuticals to make sure that you understand you're going to need this inoculation many times. Now, the state of the art and the science at this point in time, that statement I just made appears to be true, but it may not be. So what was it like in the hospital? I've got this, and I'll post the actual picture of it, but this is one representative example of hospital food in the VA system. Unlike St. Luke's, where I went for the last heart attack, unlike St. Luke's, they don't give you a menu. This is what you get today. Eat it. So I tried things I hadn't tried for lots of years. I thought I didn't like sweet potatoes. I found out I did. And I found out as much as I thought that I didn't like Brussels sprouts. That's true. I don't like them. But I ate them. I especially liked the blueberry cobbler, even though it was only about that much. So much for the hospital food. They fed me well, they fed me timely, they fed me on time, and they did not feed me too much. They kept a constant check on my diabetes. Every time they drew blood, there was a diabetic check, as well as stabbing me and doing the blood sugar thing. And the reason for that is that diabetes is responsive to stress, and COVID is a strong stressor. And they wanted to make sure that the diabetes was not going out of control. So I got to deal with that. I dealt with a TV system that had a limited amount of movies, all of which I'd seen before. So I found out how much I either did or didn't like the old movies, because I watched them again. I watched my first NFL game since Kaepernick took a knee, and I saw no one take a knee. I didn't hear the national anthem. They just showed the game. And then I watched the Oregon Ducks play 2 games, and they lost both of them. Reminded me of the Oregon Ducks back in the 70s and early 80s. Same type of thing. You knew from about halfway through the second quarter they were going to lose. And sure enough, they did, just the way that you could see they were going to. So the reality of the COVID thing, to get back to that, is that it is real. I've talked to an amazing number of people who have had it, and it's been no worse than a mild cold. And that's after identifying positive. The mask thing, the more I've studied on that, the more of a joke I realize it is in some respects. Because to do it right, they would do it much more aggressively than they are. But when you're wearing a mask, I'm protected. When I'm wearing a mask, I'm protected. Why do I need 2 masks? Am I then protected? The answer is, of course, because we're talking about the airborne particles. But what about the ones that you leave around the house? How did I get this? The first time I got it, I think I got it from some kids who came over for a visit. And what was frustrating to me is their parents knew that they had it and didn't say anything about it. I had given both of the kids a hug. but I don't know that's what did it. I actually have no real idea what did it the first time. This time, Marlene, my wife's sister, had tested positive. And I'm living here in the same house. How practical is it to go through the house 6, 8, 10, 12 times a day and wipe everything down? But I'm not saying Marlene gave it to me, because it turns out that we had a member of our church come into the house who had it and didn't know he had it. Could have been them. I also went out because I wasn't afraid of it. I had already had it, and I thought, well, I'm immune. So I didn't know I was going to get it again. Misinformation. And so there's so many places I could have gone it because I didn't limit my activity. So I don't know the second time where I got it, but Karen has just tested positive, and so we're both in the isolation period. Me from testing positive and getting out of the hospital, and her testing positive while I was in the hospital. So about 10 days from now, we will again be available to go out and catch it again. They recommended, I made a joking comment early on about having had it back in October, and I was worried about my wife because my new wife, because we did what young lovers would do. Old lovers do the same thing. We'd swapped a little spit. And I made that comment as a joke, and that particular, I made it to a nurse. She started telling me about when her husband got COVID and the worries she had, and that she was amazed that she didn't get it because they swapped spit too. So now here it is a few days later, and I'm checking out, and then a different nurse has a checklist, and he's going through the checklist of pieces of advice, and I have them here. They gave me just a whole bunch of information on the COVID and pieces of advice, things to do and not do, changes in my drug panel and things like that. And one of the things they wrote down here, I should have taken a picture of it. One of the things they wrote down here is, don't swap spit with people you know have COVID. So that caused me quite a jolt of humor. And when I shared that with Karen, of course, we both took it serious. And we've decided here at the house, until we get through the isolation period, here at the house, as a practical matter, it won't work to wear a mask all the time. But we are wearing masks at the house here. And for those times that, as a practical matter, we're not going to worry about it because we both have the COVID anyway. And Marlene, like I said, is getting over it. The other thing is we have an extra bedroom here, and we've discussed the possibility of setting it up so that all three of us can have separate bedrooms to help cut down on the exposure. Marlene has a bunch of serious problems. She is a little bit older. She's in her 80s. And her problems are pretty serious, and we worry about her a lot. And she seems to be doing well. There's a lot of promise in doing the right things to remain healthy. So one of the things I told you is that I'm going to tell you the truth, which I try to do all the time anyway. And we can all have what we say be misconstrued or not say it well, and it looks like we're not telling the truth, but I'm trying to tell the truth. And one of the truths I've found in studying the CDC site and talking to other people who have had the COVID, talking to a COVID doctor specialist, a COVID nurse specialist, is that when we apply the science, the actual real science, a lot of the things that are being done politically, and I'm not going to label it as D or R, I will label it as swamp. A lot of the things that are being done politically are just that, for politics. And politicians are by definition liars. There's a difference between a statesman and a politician. I've said this before. And the politicians lie for their own political purposes. A statesman works for the benefit of the people he or she represents. We don't have any statesmen in the Congress right now. Trump's probably the closest thing we've had to a statesman, but what he was is a neophyte politician and a businessman. And so he positions and postures for his own purposes. So you got the swamp, you got the D's, you got the R's, you got that joke Bernie Sanders, who just admitted today that by association that he's been part of the D effort to deny people chrono relief and work on the cure and those kinds of things. I found that interesting. But I've just taken a side trip I didn't really mean to take. The truth of the matter is that when we go to the truth of the matter, and the punchline to close this out is that there's nothing coming down the pike in the form of an inoculation that will give you a forever cure or avoidance of the CV. Not going to happen, at least at the state of the science and the art right now. So you're going to be faced, if you're one who elects to take that, to get that shot, you're going to be taking one probably 2 or 3 times a year. That's one of the realities. Another one of the realities that I've learned is that masks ultimately don't work. I said ultimately, because for periods of time they do provide protection. They do stop some of the airborne COVID travel. But there's so much more that has to go into that. I learned that you can get it over and over again. I've had it twice. I have no doubt of it. I think the VA's approach to the statistics is that they're not going to label something as CV related unless there's a positive test or a blood test that shows that the person has CV and it could be related. So those are some of the realities I faced. The hospital stay. I was lightheaded, difficulty walking, all of the symptoms that they talk about. I had it all. And I tried to not let it affect my attitude. I tried to stay positive and work with the nurses in a positive way. I met a couple of amazing nurses, Victor and David, Dr. Bader. Dr. Singh was my last one. I didn't get a chance to know him, but I would have liked to. The cardiologist, I'm set up for an appointment in 3 weeks to go in and have my blood panel reviewed and have my medication panel reviewed and to make sure that everything there is the way it needs to be. Because it was interesting, I take a lot of literally life-giving drugs, and with the COVID, some of the responses I had were much more timely and quicker to the drugs than I've had in the past. So I have a lot of things to think about. These are some things for you to think about. They recommended that I get active doing exercises, but that I don't be stressful. I said, what does that mean? They said, well, if it's nothing more than getting up and walking, if you can do it, walking 10 minutes a day can extend your life. They've got these rubber stretch bands that you do for exercises while you're sitting down and things like that. They recommended bands. Again, maybe 10 minutes a day to start out and then see how it progresses. They told me something that I didn't know that was really interesting. And that is that because of how the CV attacks your respiratory system, when you sleep on your back, your lungs expand one way. When you sleep on your stomach, your lungs expand the other way. And that if you have an option, you're better off sleeping on your stomach than your back. I found that to be truly interesting, and I asked them, I gave them the third degree over that, why is that? And they said because when you're sleeping on your back, your lungs expand and contract the same way that they do when you're vertical and you're upright. But when you sleep on your stomach, your lungs expand backwards and they fill better. Fill, F-I-L-L. They fill better and they expand better and they provide you more oxygen, which surprisingly is essential, not just to living, but in helping your body's antibodies fight the COVID. So there's a few little things for you. I have rambled on, but one of the things that you haven't had generally is anybody, I haven't found anybody who's talked this direct, blunt, and frank on the internet so I could get information I could weigh, who've had the CV and actually said, okay, here's where it is, this is what is happening. I could tell you about my roommate, but it's enough to say that he is seriously challenged. They're feeding him oxygen, drugs, all that good stuff. And even though I'd only had him in the room for a day, he had already started being responsive. A lot of times, people, myself included, the first go around with the COVID, we ride it out. We let things unfold. We don't like going to the doctor. You don't like giving blood every 4 hours. You don't like having 5 ports in your arm. I mean, there's a whole bunch to that. We don't like it, and we don't go when we should. What I've learned about the CV is if you're having any kind of respiratory attack, get checked. Get it taken care of. They have, besides the new drugs that they're developing, they have all kinds of ways to help you get through this process if you're going to need help. I am much more sensitive to this whole thing, and I am really grateful that I had the first CV experience, because this time when I started having pain in both sides of my chest, which is the first time that's happened, my oh crap factor went up, and I went, whoa, something's going on here. After just a few hours of that, and it not getting better, slowly getting worse, and Karen, being a wife, picking at me, I mean that in a positive way. It was easier to make the decision to make the initial call for emergency and to get the speak Don, go through their protocol thing for a determination of whether I needed to go in. And it was real clear. I mean, they were ready to send the ambulance and call if I wouldn't do it. So I think it behooves all of us to take a serious look at our view and our attitudes, not from a political standpoint, but from a health standpoint, based on the science as we know it and everything we're learning as this unfolds. I don't mean this to be a lecture. Each of you will do what you do. But I've had friends die in the last 2 weeks. CB. I'll leave it there. You each do what you're going to do. My prayer, my constant prayer for all of you, those on my friends list, family, personal close friends, for each of you, is that you can enjoy the love of your family, especially during this holiday season, and that you can all be safe. If there's any one gift you can give more than any other, it's to keep your family safe. And you can't take care of your family if you don't take care of yourself. That is the real punchline. So take care of yourself so you can be the leader and role model for your family. I'm moralizing and lecturing. You do whatever you're going to do. And if you don't care enough to take care of yourself, send me a note telling me that you don't really want me at your funeral. With that said, my prayers for your health, safety for you personally and your loved ones is constant. And I wish you all well. Make it so.